Classic Mac Pro is my favorite Apple product. Over the years, I owned multiple ones. In the left, you see a 3.1 version. I use it to run a old macOS and use a old Photoshop on it. Because I don't like all the subscription software, I prefer using my very old Photoshop, which I purchased years ago. 2008 Mac Pro is perfect running it. In the right side, 4.1, and I already upgraded to 5.1, and I use it in my server room to run the Big Sur macOS. It runs so fast, I even prefer it over the latest M1 Mac Minis. I like them so much. In fact, I just bought a third one, which is in the middle. It's a 4.1 version. I plan to run ESXi 7 on it. You may ask why. You have a Apple hardware, why not directly run macOS on it? There are mainly two reasons. I need a server which I can use to switch among multiple versions of macOS back and forth quickly. And the second reason is to have as less modifications as possible, which means I don't want to hack into any software. ESXi is a perfect option to run macOS on Apple hardware. Just to show you the end result, let's ride on the time machine and go to the future. Let's see what I get after the installation. In the right, you see two examples which are running at the same time. Upper one is the latest macOS Monterey. Right bottom one is very old version, which is 10.7. They run perfectly fine. And in the left, the ESXi 7. When I create a virtual machine for the guest OS, if I choose macOS, in the drop down, you see all the versions from 10.5 all the way to 12. Which is Monterey, except for 10.4, which is the very earliest Intel version of macOS. I believe it's macOS Tiger. That's the only exception, so you can run everything starting from 10.5. This guest OS installation only works when you are using Apple hardware. If you use a non-Apple server, yes, you can still see the option, but you cannot properly install it and run it. Of course, there are a lot of tips or ways to hack into ESXi, but as I mentioned, I don't want to do that, and I want to use the original softwares to run the original macOS without any software modifications. By the way, here ESXi gives you all the options to install different versions of macOS. It doesn't mean you can legally run whatever you want. I strongly suggest you to read the Apple EULA or do the research when you decide to run macOS on ESXi and how many you can run on ESXi. Let's come back to hardware. Even though the three Mac Pros look identical from outside, internally they are different. This is the comparison between the 3.1 and the 4.1. As you can see, for the 4.1, which is the hero for this video, which I'm going to upgrade, it has the removable CPU and the memory tray. This is the comparison between the two different 4.1s. The left one is the one I already use in my server room. It has only one processor. And the right one, which is the one for this video, it has two processors. In this video, there are many steps involved, so I think it's better to draw a diagram so that we can clearly see what needs to happen and why they need to happen. To explain the reasons, let's start from the end. Our end goal is to install as many versions of macOS as possible, especially the newest one, right? So let's say I want to install Monterey or Big Sur. I need to first decide which ESXi version I need. This is a PDF document from VMware. Let's check the macOS guest OS section 12, which is the latest one, the Monterey. Very strange. Here it says ESXi 7 and 6.7, but if you check macOS 11, it only supports ESXi 7, and for earlier version, for example 10.15, they all only mention ESXi 7. Only the latest one, it has a odd 6.7. I'm not sure whether it's a typo or not, but it doesn't matter because anyway, I want to install ESXi 7. Let's go back to the diagram. I want to use the powerful CPU. My Mac Pro 4,1 comes with dual 4-core CPU. They are pretty weak. I want to upgrade to the latest and the best CPU which can be supported by Mac Pro 5,1. Now we need to decide whether we can just upgrade the CPU on the Mac Pro 5,1. We are good, or we want to go through the lengthy path just to support SSD boot. Long story short, to support SSD boot, especially NVMe boot, you need to upgrade the firmwares multiple times. I do need to go through the lengthy path. But if you don't care, you can directly upgrade the Mac Pro 5,1 and install ESXi already. So you can take this red shortcut. But for me, I want to go with the lengthy one. Now we decide to support NVMe SSD. I need to at least try to install macOS Mojave. This is the most difficult part because just to try to install Mojave, you need to have a Metal compatible GPU. For the Mac Pro 5,1 or 4,1, by default, they come with the original GPU, which is not Metal compatible. So basically, you cannot even start the installation for Mojave. To make it happen, I need a Metal compatible GPU. Keep in mind, I don't care about gaming, I don't care about 3D. I only want to upgrade the firmware. To make it happen, I need this GPU, right? Of course, once the firmware is upgraded, I don't really need it. I can move it to somewhere else. Before that, we need to update the firmware another time because it needs to support Apple file system, the new file system, which is included in this firmware upgrade. To upgrade it, I need to first convert this machine to a Mac Pro 5,1 because for the Mac Pro 4,1, the highest OS it supports is 10.11, which is El Capitan. Just to install High Sierra so that I can upgrade firmware, I need to first upgrade it to Mac Pro 5,1. So that's why I need to go through this tricky part to convert the firmware from 2009 to 2010. Hopefully it doesn't scare you. In fact, many steps are very fun. Let's get started. The very first step is to install El Capitan. I won't bore you about this installation because everything is regular, and let's assume, okay, I already have it installed. No any tricks. Now we are ready to upgrade my Mac Pro 4,1 to 5,1. If it's the first time for you to hear that, you may have doubt. How can you DIY and upgrade the hardware from one version to another version, right? That's the amazing part for Mac Pro 4,1. That's why it's so valuable. It's cheaper than 5,1, but just a small trick. You can do it by yourself, convert it to a better and later version. They are almost identical from hardware to software. The only difference which I am aware of, we are going to talk about that later in the CPU installation part, but for now you can simply assume they are exactly the same. And to convert it, it's super simple. There are tons of tutorials on the web. I won't repeat that. I simply download the tutorials and run them and reboot the system. That's done. So within 1 minute, you have a Mac Pro 5,1. Now we are here already. we have a Mac Pro 5.1. Now we are ready to do the first official firmware upgrade to support the Apple file system. The way Apple upgrade firmware is through its macOS installation. It doesn't have a separate application to upgrade firmware. You have to do the whole operating system upgrade. So now we need to install High Sierra. This is what I see when trying to install High Sierra. It tells me first I need to upgrade the firmware, and it directs me how to do it. It's very simple steps. Again, after about 2 minutes, the firmware upgrade is done. I'm ready to proceed with the High Sierra installation. Okay, macOS High Sierra has been installed. Now we are ready to talk about Metal GPU. Here I'm showing you two graphical cards. This one is one from Mac Pro. It only supports macOS up to High Sierra. And this one is a RX 560. It is Metal compatible. These two are not the ones used in my Mac Pro 5.1, but I just want to use them to show you the difference. Just to run ESXi, you don't really need a Metal graphical card, especially in the recent 2 years. Price for GPU has been ridiculous. For example, this macOS compatible Metal cards, they are sold on eBay maybe double the price when they were still brand new. So the prices was ridiculous. So my recommendation is, if you really need one, if you don't really care about 3D, just want to install the latest macOS or upgrade firmware, you can buy the cheapest one. If you do not replace the graphical card with a Metal compatible one, this is what you will see if you try to install macOS Mojave. It simply refuses to continue. Replace the original graphical card with this Metal support GPU. Then try the Mojave installation again. You see different message. Now everything's fine. It's just telling you, okay, it need to upgrade the firmware. So you need to repeat the operation which you already done previously when installing High Sierra. After macOS Mojave is installed, we are ready to talk about SSD. Of course, you can use the cheaper one, the SATA version, the 2.5-inch SSD. But the problem is, no matter what's the speed of your SSD, you are limited with the SATA speed of the hardware of the Mac Pro. Someone choose the PCI card and insert the SATA SSD there. Yes, it will improve performance. The problem is you need to buy a PCI card. The SATA version is not much cheaper than NVMe version, but you have much slower speed, right? In my opinion, it's not worth it. So I go with the NVMe version. You can buy from Amazon, buy a PCI card, very cheap. Then you can insert whatever NVMe card, NVMe SSD you like. Yes, you can buy a super expensive PCI card and it can support the best performance. If you go with the cheap card, because the Mac Pro we are talking about only support PCI 2.0, speed is limited. So normally your NVMe card is 3000 at least. It doesn't matter what's the speed limit of your NVMe card, it's already overkill. So my suggestion is go with a good brand NVMe card, you are good. Finally, we are at this CPU step. In my opinion, this is a step which is full of challenges and it's also very satisfying. You will have a lot of fun. Let's start from why we need to do something to the CPU in the first place. Let me remove the two heat sinks and get the two original CPU out, and then show you what we need to do to install the new CPU. If you have the two processor version, the CPU installation is different than the single processor Mac Pro. Because of the height of the heatsink, you have to remove the so-called CPU lid or heat spreader from the top of the CPU so that you can install the heatsink back. That's the most scary part in the whole process. Basically, you are modifying the CPU and you are using very basic tools to do a surgery on the CPU. I'm now just removing the two heat sinks so that we can check the CPU. Okay, both CPUs are removed. This is the original one. As you can see, they don't have the silver color heat spreader. But if I show you the two I purchased from eBay, you can see they look slightly different. The new one does have a heat spreader, so that's what we need to remove. If you buy a CPU from eBay, this is what it looks like when you receive it. It contains two parts. This one is the CPU itself, and this silver color one, super heavy, is called heat spreader. So it's attached to the CPU using two different approaches. See the black part around it? So it's kind of a rubber material. It's used to seal the two parts and attach them together. And in the middle, you see the silver color one. It basically the cover or the spreader, it's soldered on the CPU. So to separate them, you need to first use some sharp stuff to cut the rubber open, then use heat to melt down the soldered part. That's how you separate the CPU. First, I need to use single edge blade to remove the rubber black color side, the sealing part, from each side of the heat spreader. And insert the blade to each side of the heat spreader. Pay attention, don't insert it too deep, don't cut the inside. We want to have the supporter for the heat spreader so that when the CPU fall down, the heat spreader won't fall down and won't hit the CPU itself. They also act as some kind of shield so that your heat gun won't make your CPU too hot. Then we use heat gun to melt the material down. So the melting point is a little bit more than 300 Fahrenheit. I'm adjusting the temperature of the heat gun to 400 Fahrenheit and blow it for several minutes. Be patient. Don't make the temperature higher because you are risking destroying the CPU. So be patient. After several minutes, you'll hear a pop sound and the CPU will drop automatically by itself. And your heavy heat spreader, the metal one, will still remain on the top because you have the 4 single edge blade supporting it. I use the rubber gloves as a buffer, so the CPU dropped on the gloves. Yeah, this is the CPU. As you can see in the middle, the metal one was melted down. That's why it fell off. And on the top, you have the cover. Yeah, this is the inside. This is the outside. Okay, success. Before we can install the CPU to the computer, we need to clean it up. First, use a new very sharp blade to clean the remaining metal in the middle. Don't worry about the blade because the remaining metal is very soft. You can easily remove them. What you get is very shiny, smooth surface. It's very easy. The last step, we need to use a new blade to remove the remaining black rubber in the 4 sides. And be careful, don't cut the circuits, the CPU itself, and be patient. And you don't have to make it super clean, as long as if you use your finger, you cannot feel the remaining part. That's fine. Even if you can still see something, it doesn't matter as long as you cannot feel it. Okay, the surgery to the CPUs are done. Now we can install them back to the CPU tray. This is the easiest part. The very last step for this video is to install ESXi 7. You know what? This step is not as easy as you may think. Let me show you. This is the error you will see. Basically, it says, no, you cannot proceed. Your CPU is not supported by this version. And because it's error, you have no way to proceed. You have to stop the installation. Let's see how we can work around it. When you boot the installer from your thumb drive, when you see this message, you have 5 seconds to press Shift-O. Then you can provide some boot parameter, and we can override the ESXi's default behavior. What we want to input is allow legacy CPU equals to true. Yeah, that's it, and then hit enter. We are good to go. This is the message you will see this time. It seems the message is exactly the same, but pay attention, it's not error anymore, it's just warning. In the lower part, as you can see, you can hit enter to continue. In this way, we work around the limitation of ESXi 7. Of course, this is just home lab. At least I am good to use legacy CPU to run macOS. Once you have the ESXi 7 installed, you are good to proceed with macOS installation. Because this video is already more than 20 minutes, I will have a separate video to introduce all the tips and the tricks to install all the supported macOS virtual machines on the ESXi 7. Thanks for watching.